It is just such a pleasure to look at this room because when I first heard about the word ODR, I didn't even know what it was. Pramod Rao, the other Pramod in the ecosystem, told me about it. To see, from 4 years ago, to see this room is just remarkable. And as always, absolutely delighted to be having this chat with Pramod. We are so excited about what the possibilities are that we haven't stopped. I mean, I don't even think we've got a script. I have a script, but it's out of the window because we just had 5 more ideas as we were sitting there.
And they cut our time, I think.
They cut our time. I know.
Because only so much they can listen to us.
So please, you have to get us off stage when our time is over because we're not going to leave.
We'll continue talking.
So Pramod, the reason I enjoy talking to Pramod is because he does this unbundling, right? He takes a problem and then he unbundles it. And so you get to look at what you thought was a sort of a straight path, and it's sort of just broken up into pieces and put back together. And so after that introduction by Nandan, where he says how important it is to do this, I thought perhaps we could spend the time taking some of the India Stack approach to unbundling dispute resolution in order to see if we can come up with some sort of crazy new ideas that this room will then go and execute. So I just wanted to first talk about the process of dispute resolution. Any ideas that you have on how we might just explode it and put it back together in a different way?
You're putting me on the spot. I'm not an expert in any of this, but I think let's talk about unbundling a little bit. So I think if you look at the idea, where did this come from? I mean, anything at human scale, we build a house, or look at a car that we buy. It doesn't come from one party. It comes from many, many, many creators. Many parts are created by many, many people independently. And what's called, interoperability allows the doorknob you buy to fit into a door, and the door fit into a house, and the house, the grills fit into the window, and so on, right? None of them are built by the same people. So if you look at scale, you will realize the idea of unbundling, idea of independently people building independent things, but they come together to solve something much more contextually to you. Your house, the way you want, you get to build, using the same components, using the same unbundled pieces of the puzzle. So I think that's a very, very physical thing we have seen. But when it comes to technology, though, we are notoriously bad. Okay, so maybe we are technologists that way. Maybe confusing everyone else who are not technologists, right? We use lots of terms just to confuse everyone, and then end up building something very complex. But when we build, what we end up building is something very monolithic. It's like building the whole house from scratch by yourself, right? I will literally do everything by myself, including building the bricks from the mud, and start doing. Neither efficient, nor you get fungibility. You don't get evolvability. For example, when the tire goes flat, you don't change the car. You change the tire. Someone has built interoperability up front. So we forget to think the same way when it comes to digital interventions. So that was the reason why the idea of digital public infrastructure, like India Stack, as we call, worked. The simplicity of each of the building block in India Stack, identity building block dealt only with identity, 4 attributes, 2 things it does, at scale for 1.36 billion people. Again and again and again. Nothing else it did. I mean, the card didn't even look good. It was like a plasticky thing. But the power of that thinking is that now someone else get Pramod Rao, for example, sitting inside, we say, aha, I get to now use identity to onboard the customer into a mutual fund account without having the friction of filling paperwork, keeping the paperwork and the cost and everything else. The cost of onboarding, cost of trust, cost of reusing the same thing, it's so high that people would say no. So the informal economy thrives, because we just don't let them come into the formal system at all. It's not viable. How can 600,000 villages, bank branches with AC rooms and officers come? It's not going to happen. But we managed to get banking to people. We never got banks to people. We got banking to people. That's because digitally it allows you to do, right? So the idea is that, now in the context of ODR, we can ask the same questions. When, as Nandan set it up, when many parties come together in the digital realm to participate and complete a transaction, many parts can go wrong. But when this happens, it's important to understand that subtlety. If entire flow of that business transaction happen in one place, you tend to have one system keeping all the data and somewhat trying to provide the trust around that data. But that's not real. We have, as he said, some Google Pay or Phone Pay on one side, banks on another side, somewhere else in UPI, we have 5 parties, 4 parties, 5 parties, very easily in every UPI transaction. In ONDC, we're going to have more. Delivery company is different. Supplier is different. Buying app is different. Selling app is different. So how do you bring trust? Trust is a very important aspect of it. Interoperability is, Nandan mentioned, an important aspect of it. Portability of this information from one place to other place is important aspect. So those are very good building blocks. So if I were to think, I would say, I ordered something. Is there a proof? Verifiable, non-disputable. Proof that I did order something. Make sure it's verifiable and non-disputable. Then you ask the question, was it delivered? Is there a proof that it was delivered, signed by both parties, and subsequently you can't say, I don't know whether it was delivered. Maybe some courier paper you signed, somebody signed is not a verifiable proof, right? Because this is what's happening today. All those unverifiable data today, we take it in a big docket and dump it in front of the judiciary and say, now you deal with it, right? Let's start all over again, trust building. So the amount of work you will do to even get to the core of that system, core of that dispute, so much pre-work is coming fundamentally because most of the data is not verifiable, most of the data is not even, parties have not even agreed to or not agreed to. So it's very important you unbundle few things. Identity, very strong identity of people. Was there, who ordered it, who delivered it? And in the digital world, the identity has to be very cleanly managed. Second, the data that's coming out of that. E-invoices we did with GSTN. E-way bills we are doing with GSTN. So when we start doing this transaction, each of those assets that comes out of that interaction or a transaction, you credentialize it. What does it mean, credentializing? Like vaccine credentials all of us got. Unlike in the US, which was handwritten, that is not verifiable. Whereas India, we have created a verifiable proof that you are vaccinated, right? So if you can convert this into form of credential with strong identity and the facts are, you can't dispute, both have signed off already. Then it creates enormous possibility for subsequently to do auto adjudication, pre-processing, quick resolution of things, all that thing comes later. But if you push junk here, then you will have significant inefficiencies later. I think that's where we are.
So, I mean, gosh, there's just so much to drill down into. But I'm going to just split that thing that you said into 2 parts. I think there's the sort of the process part, which you said, which, you have to get the documents and you reduce the number of documents, but you still have to put something. And there's that other part, which I thought was really interesting that I think it's worthwhile spending a little more time on. And that is the truth-finding part. Because ultimately, the first stage of a dispute is what is the undisputable truth between the parties and what is the truth that parties are disputing. And if we can find a mechanism, I'm just thinking if you unbundle it in this manner, and we can find a mechanism, because we're in a DPI world, where a large part of what we are doing is already taking place digitally.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we can rethink truth-finding in this context, that we can then plug it directly into ODR and take out that the sort of the drudgery of the first part, which is establish evidence, cross-examination, witnesses, is there a way to do truth finding that is credentialized, that is verifiable, that can then plug in as the undisputed facts into the dispute, so that then the judges only have to deal with that small little piece, which for some reason was not capable of being credentialized?
I think this is the core of population scale transformation you want to think about. Lot of us worry about what happens at the end of the flow, what happens in the court. But we don't think about that every system is going to be digitized. Digital is a way, whether it's property system, whether it's tax paying system, whether it's FIR system, whether any order management system or e-commerce systems, on the edges, every system is being digitized. That's where the opportunity lies. That's where the real opportunity lies. Saying, what if we can get evidences credentialized, data credentialized, identity is verifiable, so that at source, where it happened, I went to a hospital. How do you know I went to a hospital? I did surgery. How do I know it? Maybe there is a dispute. Much later, we dispute. And when that dispute comes, we go back and try to get all these unverifiable documents and then dump it today. So, but what if we can, because these systems are already being digitized, what if we can convert them immediately into a copy that both parties can keep, which is like vaccine certificate, digitally signed, preferably in what's called machine readable. That means digital, natively digital, not scanned and so on. If we can do that, every subsequent processing now becomes much, much faster. Very, very easy for us to, now suddenly you can see so much inefficiency can just go away. Because you already agreed. You did have a surgery. There's no dispute about it. Or you did have this, or you bought it, you delivered it. And let's evidences. Can evidences be credentialized? Can all that upfront, when that happens, whenever it happens. So wherever so truth finding, I'm not sure that it sounds very
I invented the word,
scary
so
to me.
it doesn't exist. But
who knows what the truth is? But anyway, facts, establishing facts when it occur is the best time to digitize and credentialize the facts, not later. Keep that in mind all the time when you work on it. We have technologies like identity, digital identities are very, very these days strong. Digital signature under IT Act, we can very, very strongly use it. We should encourage the facts and documents and certificates to be digitally signed. Hopefully the court system would start saying, if it is digitally signed, we would accept it, and then no more dispute about it because it's signed off by both parties. Then there's one more interesting thing with ODR you can do. Even though the facts may be credentialized, there might be still subjective aspects of it that comes up later in the process flow. So maybe another possibility is to think about how ODR can pre-process these between the parties before even reaches the judiciary for any final call. That would be a wonderful exploration possibility. I'm just asking.
What do you mean by pre-process? What
like we do
some
today.
Example of some processing?
Okay, and there's one more thing, right? We can also, today, just as a technology, I'm just saying what is available already. And I'm pretty sure everybody heard ChatGPT because it's a cool thing to talk about it. But it's not ChatGPT problem. We have the AI related, we have Dr. Vivek here who's been leading all our AI effort. AI has been so powerful to not worry about a handwritten FIR being interpreted, read again, and translated again, as it goes through High Court to Supreme Court and so on, right? You could do at source itself. We could translate it, multiple languages, digitally sign it, establish that fact. Then use that subsequently so that later, the cost of processing later is very, very high. Whatever is it, cost of even software and all, when we build, designing upfront is much easier, okay? Correction is much painful later. So I think if we can do that, it'll be powerful. So leverage technologies like the effort of Indic languages effort, which Vivek is leading, for example. All these are now available in open source in India. You can actually leverage ODR, and entrepreneurs are here. So I encourage you to establish lots of facts. Then the point I was saying is that Then in the ODR process flow, could we agree on 10 things that we agree as parties? And then sign off, saying that this is not the dispute, we all agree. And then get to the gist of where the real dispute is. So facts and evidences are digitized and credentialized. Agreements between both parties during workflow as much as possible is agreed upon and signed off, digitally signed off. Then what you are left with is where the real core of discussion that ought to occur in a court, I suppose. At least that part you leave it. Today we leave a lot of junk in the code and then say you deal with it, right?
I mean, as you were saying all this, I was just wondering, this is an ODR audience, so it's okay, but the audiences I'm normally at, we'd all be out of a job. And this is, there's a limit to how much you can threaten my livelihood with technology.
No, I think I would think differently. And very interestingly, there's two ways to look at it. You see it as a threat, because that you see that you're taking away, in one sense, part of what you do. I look at it as expansion of access. The same number of lawyers now can serve using technologies, tier 3, tier 4 towns, a woman in some village who don't have legal information asymmetry and access asymmetries. Very, very high. There's no near good. You could serve a lot more at lower cost. So you would not reduce your revenue. You would continue to, the rich people are always disputing, so you always have billing, not an issue. You can continue to bill, but you can actually use technology to reach very, very large people and provide somewhat similar experience and ease of dealing with this conflict in their life using technology. That I'm excited about. Yeah.
No, I'm not a Luddite by any stretch of imagination. Everyone knows that. I just wanted to double click on one of the things that you said, because when we've had these conversations and the early days of Aadhaar, you told me that, when we took this problem, the computational problem of Aadhaar to, I don't know, MIT or whatever, they said there aren't enough computers on the planet to solve this problem. And you said that you trusted silicon and Moore's law. And so you built for something
future
that didn't exist and no one even thought it could. And that's how Aadhaar was able to crack a computational problem that at the time was not crackable. And essentially, what I hear you tell this audience of people who are building is, if you're building for today, you're basically building for the traditional way of doing evidence. And so you have to solve that problem. But we have the opportunity.
You're building for the past most of the time.
In a sense, we're building for the past, because even what we're building, we basically have to catch up to the past with our digital. But this idea of building for a world where everything is digitized, I'm almost scared to think about that. What would it mean for an audience? When you say credentialized evidence, can you give us an example of what that could be? I know credentials, which is my education certificate or something like that. But that's not enough. We need actual sort of live facts to be credentialized in a undisputable manner.
This is very, very interesting. Again, I'm not from this domain at all, so I might be making total no sense at all. But I would say from other domains that I've worked on, evidences that today the access to commodity, cameras, microphones, in everybody's hand. So when a packet arrives in e-commerce transaction that is broken, I ordered a shoe, I get a brick in my packet, I have an evidence when I open that bag with that QR code from the provider in that box. Now you can still dispute that you put something there and all that. I think there is differentiated levels of dispute, but most of the time companies sort of take it. You could have immediately said that's an evidence, and people do capture evidence. You'll be surprised how much evidence is actually captured on the spot. So we do have technologies today in the hands, highly commoditized technology that allows us to capture a lot more evidences that traditionally we could capture 50 years ago or 40 years ago, where you had to somebody has to transcribe and write down and capture what actually happened. Today you have a recording of what happened. This is what's happening, right? But now, how do you know that's not fake? How do you know that's not like AI generated something? Or that is where, when it occurred, both parties can actually show, maybe we agree also. How do you know? Maybe we agreed on partly, maybe we didn't agree. But whatever we agreed, sign off. Sign off means what? Digitally sign it from both parties. Once that happens, that evidence is now indisputable, right? I saw the photograph, I agree, you agree, both of us agree, and then that's how it is. Property documents today, most of our assets that way, digital assets as we call, as we generate, are not signed, digitally signed.
Yeah.
Because of that, no one trusts later. When I give the same thing somewhere else, it's the same as bank statement. Why do you think, account aggregator is really changing the world, the game? Is that today a bank statement that you get from the bank is a PDF statement or an Excel sheet that you can tamper with. You can easily add a zero. The problem is that when I give it to someone else, like a visa processing, they would say, I don't know whether you added a few more zeros to get a visa. So what do? They ask you to print it out, go to the bank, and every page, this side and that side, okay? Both sides. What if the other side is tampered? So you put extra seal, maybe 2 seals, and get extra signature, as if I couldn't fake the seal. I can easily fake the, come on. If I can do all the faking, I can do the faking. So basically, you harass the hell out of good people, and then bad people anyway in the system, right? They can put a seal. There's no big deal. Account aggregate is completely transforming that idea, saying that whatever the bank is giving you is machine readable, but signed by the bank, digitally signed by the bank. That means once I take that Excel data packet from the bank, out from the bank, no one can tamper with it. I can't tamper. Now I hand it over to you, you hand it over to someone else. All through this decentralized chain, no one can tamper with it. That means the last party who is accepting can say, absolutely. From the origination, nothing was done to this packet. Right? It's an extremely powerful idea. And whose time has come, because we are digitizing everything anyway, right? So I think this is possible with evidences, this is possible with proofs, any kind of proofs that you can think of, delivery receipts. Make sure at source they're digitally signed. The moment they are digitally signed, subsequent workflows and auto adjudications, algorithmic interventions, all possible, that compresses the time of processing, not time of judgment or not time of decision making. That's what I meant. Time of pre-processing. Half the time, we spend a lot of time on that. You get rid of that, then now you apply human intelligence and empathy or whatever you need to apply to make the final call.
You've said so much about decentralization, and that's fundamentally what the entire DPI story in India has been about. But the profession I'm in gets its validity from centralization, because we have the whole judiciary, which is built to progressively centralize. We have district judges to high courts to Supreme Court. The whole point is that this edifice generates a lot of trust.
Of course.
And I think trust is almost a sine qua non for centralization. And decentralization, I'm challenging you, that's why I said it's going to be a big one, because everything that ODR is doing is fundamentally decentralizing. But in the process, they are struggling to sort of acquire the sheen of the trust that the judiciary has. Do you have any smart unbundled ideas to create trust in a fundamentally decentralized justice delivery system?
Smart, I don't know, but I have some ideas. Okay, so how did we survive? Authorities are important. In any structured system, we all trust authorities. Some authorities may not be doing their job, but the idea of the property registrar, we can't just throw it away, and then we are back to some 1600 stealing neighbors' land and all that thing. Hopefully, we need authorities, we need structure. But the structure doesn't mean centralization. I'll tell you why. Structure is to establish trust. Trust comes, how did we traditionally do? I go to property registrar, I get a property registration document with some stamp paper, which came later. Even earlier, it was about signature or that wax seal that you put, or whatever, right? We established trust through authorities signing off. After that, authorities was not in the line when I took that paper and showed it to someone else to say, I do have the trust of the king. I have the wax seal. People trusted it. This is what happens with cash. This is what happens with public money, right? The currency. The idea of trust is transferable. It's portable. It's need not be centralized. Does not mean all data has to be in one central place. So signing is a very, very powerful societal habit that we already have. Simply convert that habit into a digital idea, digital signature. Convert everything to digital signature, convert everything, the data into machine readable. Only two things I would ask desperately, ask all of you to think about, is think of evidences and data in more computer represented forms, whatever it is, images, data sheets, evidences, documents, and so on. Second, digitally sign by authority, mutual signatures that we agree on as a contract, authority at various levels. Maybe there is a, panchayat, somebody signing off, and then there is that hierarchy is fine. Both can sign off, no big deal. But once you sign off, you can't go back on your sign, right? I have to have the right to now show that proof to someone else and make sure that the trust is actually transferable, portable. And you don't ask it, I don't trust any of this. Go back and get all over again. Don't do that. So if you can manage that well, you don't need centralization. That goes back to Nandan's earlier point. Decentralization of federated systems are the way we always have lived in the human society, not by centralizing. Just because digital is coming doesn't mean you put it into a central database. It's a bad privacy risk as well. It's a bad cybersecurity risk to put everything into a central system. So leave where the transaction or interaction occurred. But make sure that asset is signed and transferable so that I, as an individual, I, as an SME, can get my data, credentials in my form, no undisputable property, invoices, everything that I need, check issue, and I issue check. Today, check is a signed check, but imagine digitally signed copies are available. Then there's no more a dispute that I issued the check. That is for sure, right? So things like that. So you convert everything. Then you're leaving still the final, the dispute, the meat really have to be left to the decision maker to make that. And where ODR comes in is that even those decisions, lot of decisions, can we take it off the judiciary to handle between the two parties? Half the time, a lot of that can be, unless you want to do a denial of service attack, then I can take you to court.
I only had 3 cards to discuss. We've only discussed one of the cards. We have AI to do. We also have the whole process because we got stuck on the truth finding and we didn't discuss the process, but we're out of time.
I hope they did get some interesting ideas not to complicate. You don't have to complicate tech something or tech guys fix Wi-Fi kind of problem, okay? Because our tech guys are good at, right? And there's a go fix Wi-Fi. But really, it's not about that. It's about you innately knowing that we have always lived on trust, lived on identifying identities of people and so on. In the digital world, can we convert that into digitally verifiable as, evidences, documents, assets? Just do that. Just do that. Nothing else. You would be amazed how much we will see change in 10 years. Promise.
And build for the future, because
Absolutely. This is the only way to build for the future.
This is
not
inevitable.
Put everything into one central, big, software engineered, complicated system. Nothing is needed. Wherever it is, just convert it to digitally signed assets.
Okay, we've solved ODR, and we're going to just leave. Thank you very much.